Okay, so I direct a foundation, the Wallace Global Fund, and back in 2009, we started divesting our endowment from fossil fuels, which we completed in 2011. We were 100% fossil free and out of other polluting industries and utilities, and we're 16% invested in climate solutions, with 1% devoted to energy access, energy poverty globally, and we recently made $1 million commitment to invest in a wind farm at Standing Rock. So we really believe in the power of what our investments can do. So we have been supporting the fossil fuel divestment movement from its inception. And in 2013, I sat down with my board and said, listen, we need to organize philanthropy as a sector of the movement. And we need to do this for a number of reasons. One, because we can help put wind at the back of the students that are fighting these campaigns on campuses. We can kind of use the social legitimacy of philanthropy. Secondly, we can demonstrate, for instance, our own investment portfolio. We can hold up that examples of investment portfolios that are divested and are bringing successful returns. Third, we would help create a market for fossil-free products, help drive a market for fossil-free products. And fourth, we could shake up philanthropy, which badly, badly needed to be shaken up, and kind of pull back the black curtain between, or the wall between investments and program, which I would love to come back to at another point. So to date, we now have 175 foundations worldwide that not only have committed to divest, but also invest 5% of their portfolios in the solutions. Clara has worked with me on this. And in addition to that, many, many other foundations have done it but won't commit publicly. That's another story and kind of embarrassing for them because they're on the right side of history by doing it and they could help build the movement, but they don't want to come out. But as a result of forming Divest Invest Philanthropy, I've now spoken to dozens and dozens and dozens of investment committees and boards of trustees about the decision. And we did that deliberately, peer-to-peer organizing. They could bring me in, I could bring in my investment guy, and we would sit down with them and explain how to do it. Of course, the number one argument that immediately is uttered by virtually everyone is, oh, fiduciary duty, we can't threaten the risk of return, da, 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 da. What always, and that's actually an effort by the investment professionals to stymie your opening up their control over the money. I mean, that is fundamentally what they're doing, is saying, I run the money, you stay on your side of the table. And fiduciary duty is a legal obligation. First of all, there are no fiduciary police. I do realize the IRS stands as the fiduciary police, but look at the Trump Foundation. That's all I'm going to say. Second, it assumes that divestment is a threat to returns, which of course we know it is not, and we'll spend a little time talking about. But just yesterday at the State of the Divestment announcement, world-renowned investor Jeremy Grantham stood up and laid out 90 years of research that says under ordinary circumstances, you could eliminate any one sector to your investment portfolio and it would have negligible impacts on your returns. 90 years of research, no matter whatever the sector is. But third, these are not normal times. We are in the middle of a global energy transition. So that sector is particularly unstable. And what that says is that brings a climate risk to your portfolio that the fiduciaries must pay attention to. So what is that climate risk? It's the volatility of the industry now. It's peak oil by 2023. It's the pace of adoptions of renewables. It's the cost competitiveness of renewables. It's the fact that the data shows that fossil fuels returns over the last 5 years have been the worst performing sector, bar none, at the level of treasuries. So you get the risk of equities and the returns of bonds. So you look at all of those component pieces, and right now, you know that there is a threat to the performance of your portfolio. You add on to that the stranded asset risk analysis, which Bill brilliantly popularized the work of Carbon Tracker, and you see that financial risk is only growing. Add two other variables. The one is climate litigation. So if you're a fiduciary and you know the sector's not doing so well now, All the analysis says it's going to be a problem in the future, and oh my God, the companies are being sued, and they're being sued for damages. When those suits are successful, that is a material risk to the investors that the industry is vulnerable to. And then divestment itself is a risk, a material risk. Shell's latest annual report actually laid that out, that the divestment movement is a material risk. So when you add all that together alone, you understand that this sector is moving, it has moved into such a fragile state that if you as a fiduciary are not analyzing the climate risk to your portfolio, you are in violation of your fiduciary duty. I don't think the police are going to come and get you, but I think the argument is pretty clear.
Yeah.
Great. Well, first of all, fantastic to be here for this amazing week of action and to be on stage with these two heroes of mine. I am, alongside being at Share Action, I'll say a little bit about the work that we're doing and the impact we're having on this fiduciary duty debate in a second, but I'm also on the board of The Guardian, a news organization that was inspired to start an incredible Keep It in the Ground campaign by Bill's amazing work, which has a very large endowment, which the editor and the board members agreed a number of years ago. We can't have this editorial line and not walk the walk as well. So we made a major divestment decision, and I have to say, it's been a great investment decision. Very proud of that. The work that we do at Share Action, we're an NGO that's been campaigning for change in the pensions industry in our country and in the investment industry for 12 years. And what we've been fighting for a long time is for the law to recognize that there's a serious problem if trustees or fiduciaries, people who have a legal obligation to look after your best interests, are willfully ignoring the financial risks of not just climate change, but actually a wide range of sustainability factors that are influencing corporate performance and investment performance. And what's exciting about being on this panel today is that this morning, the UK government released new regulations that will require trustees of UK pension funds to put out a statement showing how they take account of environmental, social, and governance risk. And the words climate change, for the first time are in UK law requiring proper risk management by trustees. So that's actually, yeah, it's really very, very exciting moment, and we've been fighting for that for God knows how long. Actually, the fight for change in fiduciary duty really started to gather pace because of two things. One was the financial crisis 10 years ago, which revealed that somehow risk management seemed to just need a real careful look at. Huge numbers of pension fund members on both sides of the Atlantic and all over the world suffered serious losses, while the investment managers who had looked after their savings and secured huge bonuses year after year for doing so kept their bonuses, walked away. The losses were incurred by regular folks who really had to start asking more questions about, are these financial professionals fit for purpose in looking after the risks I face? But the other driver for a review of fiduciary duties is the climate crisis, because for the reasons Ellen has just laid out, there's a fundamental shift and transformation coming, which will have huge implications for investment returns and portfolios. But we need to go further, because actually we absolutely need to be demanding that it's not just a sort of financial risk management. It's actually, as Bill said earlier, about recognizing that if you look after someone's assets, you need to think about the impact of your investment decisions on the world they will live in. This is still, in a way, we haven't yet won the argument in taking it to that new extent. But what is exciting in the regulations that have been announced this morning is not that we've got everything we want, but we've got actually a major step forward in recognizing that trustees must consult and listen to the views of the beneficiaries. Trustee law and common law on fiduciary duties kind of emerged out of a very patrician world in the 19th century, and actually out of a kind of legal tradition in which people would put aside money that was for sort of widows and orphans and people that hadn't contributed. But a pension fund is a fund where you put the money in, and yet your views don't have to be listened to in the way that money is invested. And that's kind of, I think, the next frontier of the arguments we need to make about fiduciary duty, that it's my money, and I not just deserve to be, I should be consulted on the decisions that are made, because those decisions have an impact on my world. And actually, when I think about what inspired me into sort of activism and the work I do today, I look back at the suffragettes were my kind of great, great heroes. And the arguments used for why women shouldn't have the votes are eerily familiar when you hear the arguments used why regular pension fund members shouldn't, shouldn't be involved in the decisions. Well, the first argument is they don't want to be. That was the argument used, that women didn't actually want the vote. It was just a small, tiny little fragment of people over there. But the amazing, the divestment movement proves that millions of people are very interested in a conversation about what happens to their money. So that was the first argument. The other one was that, of course, that women, just weren't suitable. They didn't have the intelligence. They just didn't have the grip on these kind of things. That's also very familiar. Now, this world of investment is just a bit too complicated for you guys.
Don't worry your pretty little head.
I think what we need is a movement for reform of, it's a terrible phrase in a way, fiduciary duty, because it's the sort of thing, along with the word pension fund, that makes people want to feel straight asleep. But actually, it's where ordinary people interact with the capitalist system. It's our retirement savings that fuel everything that goes on in the corporate world. And of course we have an interest, and we deserve a seat at the table. So I feel we're making some amazing gains, not just in the UK, but actually in the rest of Europe. There's some really interesting legislation coming up the track at the European Union level. But we actually need to go deeper and further and be even more ambitious, that it's about having a seat at the table when decisions are made over things that we have an interest with our money.
One of the things that's been interesting, and I think it's really coming to a head right now, and I'd love to sort of both of you talk about it a little bit. At the beginning of this fight, the kind of standard, the version of this, to sort of to tell activists to go away and stop bothering, was to say, well, we're going to engage with the companies involved here, and we'll take care of the problem by having some meetings with them or voting some proxies or whatever. That seemed unlikely to us at the time. And as it happens, it's proved to be entirely exercise in futility. I think one of the things we really need to underline this week is the release of this latest round of reporting studies on this question of engagement, As You Sow, which is a wonderful organization that specializes in shareholder engagement. They've done great work over the years across a wide variety of industries in getting companies to change behavior through shareholder engagement. They put out a report earlier this week that, Ellen, I hope you'll talk a little more about, but it says, well, two things. The first thing it says is, by not divesting companies, pension funds and others are losing huge amounts of money. I think the figure they used for New York State's common retirement fund was the equivalent of $14,000 per member of the retirement fund. That's how much more they would have had the state merely divested when we asked them to some years ago. So $14,000 is beginning to mount into the area of real money, for at least for some of us. But the second thing, and maybe more important, was they said it's entirely clear now, after looking at a couple of 100 examples, that the engagement process with the fossil fuel industry does not work. It does not produce change. It does not get them close to complying with scientific targets. I don't think this is any huge mystery, really. We thought from the beginning that this would be impossible because the thing that we needed to engage with them on was, in fact, the core business model, not some flaw at the edge of the business model. But Ellen, what does that mean for among other things, how long can you keep pretending that you're engaged in this action? What do the next couple of years hold? How does it work, do you think?
Well, first of all, I think this is a really crucial issue, and in full disclosure, we commissioned that study that As You Sow released because we said, look, all of the big institutional investors, the really large pension funds, including California's, are saying we need to engage with the companies. We have to have a seat at the table. We have to orchestrate with them the wind down. And I would say a number of critically important things. First, this report surveyed all of the engagement that has happened, the resolutions that have been tendered, the shareholder resolutions. They've surveyed all the engagement with the fossil fuel companies and analyzed their results. And basically said there might be a little incremental win here on, methane or something there, but the resolutions themselves have not been fit for purpose. They aren't demanding of the companies a 2 degrees business plan of managed decline by date certain with clear benchmarks on the way with an ending to CapEx for future fossil fuels now. They haven't been engaging with a fit-for-purpose plan. And of course, because they haven't been engaging, they're not getting those results. And in fact, most of the resolutions, even the most incrementalist and reformist ones, aren't winning. So you look at the whole enterprise of shareholder engagement, it's a lot of effort by very big investors, and they are diddling while Rome burns, and while they are wasting the investments because they have significant losses. And that was the importance of looking at the losses in the New York example. And so here's the really interesting thing. These investors could engage with a de minimis number of shares. They don't have to hold the pensionier's lifetime savings and engage with them. They can actually engage with a few shares. So I think we're reaching the point where as the losses, the financial losses mount, and the big institutional investors do a slow walk that'll shoot us way past 2 degrees Celsius, they are going to begin to be liable for suits themselves for violation of fiduciary duty. So in fact, this is a complete turnaround on fiduciary duty. And I just want to add one thing about the losses. So I told you that we completed our divestment by 2011. Well, we had like a pesky hedge fund that we had to get rid of with like less than 1%. That took another year. So, completely by 2012. Every year since then, and we're fully ESG integrated. We have, 16% in climate solutions. Every year we have crushed our benchmarks by anywhere between 2 and 4%. Last year, our returns were 22%. So much so, those returns were so exciting. I sat down with my board and said, given the crisis of climate change and the crisis of our democracy, how can we grow our assets? How can we sit on our assets? And I said, please, let's take all these returns and put them right back into grant making. We doubled our grant making budget this year and put twice as much money into the divestment movement. Wow. So we made money by divesting to support your activism on divestment. So, we have to really call the question now with the institutional investors. So the As You Sow report laid out a challenge, and I think we reiterated that at the divestment press conference yesterday, that these folks that are persisting and engaging, it's time that they put a proposal to the companies that's time-bound. One last engagement, that they tender a 2 degrees business plan and the CapEx, tender that plan by 2020. If the companies refuse, and I'm kind of betting they're going to refuse given the history, but let's say, maybe the engagement would work. If the companies refuse, they are rogue global actors. Clearly, there's no other way you can look at them than that. And then the institutional investors must divest. They can't squander their beneficiaries' futures anymore.
So, as we've just described, holding these fossil fuel companies is exceptionally or becoming extremely risky. And so it's absolutely right that any prudent fiduciary should be looking at how much of their portfolio is held in this risky sector and these individually risky companies. At the same time, when those prudent trustees reach the conclusion that they shouldn't hold them anymore, what happens is they sell them to somebody else. So this is the nub of the challenge, which is that you can protect your portfolio through divestment, and you'll have a fiduciary duty to protect your portfolio from financial risk. But that does leave these companies still out there with their business plans that are not aligned with Paris. So Share Action is a share activism organization, and we were involved in a shareholder resolution at Royal Dutch Shell this spring. The resolution called for the company to align its business model through setting short and long-term targets with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Could not be simpler. This is what we need from every single, by the way, not just fossil fuel company, but every single utility company, every single mining company. We need the world's major corporations to be on the plan around the Paris Climate Agreement.